Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be working on my 67 F-100 Southwestern Bell service truck. The last time we saw this truck, I showed you guys the bed I found. Super excited about that bed. I'm still over the moon excited about it, even weeks later after I picked that thing up. So it's time to get this thing in the shop and running. That's why I have it pulled in here today. And I've been looking this thing over, and man, it needs a ton of work. I was hoping it was going to be a little bit kind of an easy, quick project, but I'm fearing it's snowballing into a major one because this thing needs a ton of work. But I guess that's just the way it goes. Let's go dig into it. Alright guys, like I said, this project is turning out to be a little bit more than I was wanting, but that's okay. We'll see if we can salvage something out of it. Like I said in the last video, I'm not really trying to make a huge amount of money on this thing, if any. I'm just having fun working on this thing because I thought it was such a cool, neat little truck. And majority of our problems are going to be lie under here, under the hood, and in the interior. But I think for this episode, we're going to focus more on the under the hood part, the engine part, trying to get it running, and see if we can salvage this engine, or if it's going to run. Because if we run into major problems with our engine and it for some reason doesn't run, or have mechanical problems in the engine, something like that, it's going to maybe change what I do everywhere else in the truck. So I think first things first is to get this thing running. And I've been kind of looking over it and kind of seeing the problems that I can see just off the bat without doing anything. And first and foremost, we don't have a starter. The starter on this thing is missing down there. Now that could mean that somebody was trying to get this thing running at some point and burned up the starter and yanked it out and then never put another one in. Or that's the reason this thing's off the road, is the starter went bad, the guy pulled it off to have it rebuilt or something, and the guy said, hey, we can't fix this, a new one's this much, and someone said, I'm not spending that on this thing, and parked it in the weeds, and here we are. Or there's something else wrong with it, and they pulled the starter out of it to go on something else. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. I do have a old starter that I pulled off one of our other trucks that has a 300 in it, and I'm going to throw that in here. I did test it to make sure it spun. It's another truck that's been off the road for a very long time. I tested the starter. It doesn't sound great, but it works, so I think we're going to just throw it in here to test it. It's super easy to work on these 300s. You have all the room in the world. Well, this is the 240, same thing. And so, first that starter, we have to have a starter to see if the thing's going to run. The next step, underneath this little cute oil bath air cleaner, the carburetor here, you're probably not going to be able to see it, it's too dark. But I did look down in there, and there's a bunch of debris, rat debris, this kind of stuff. Not very much, but there's a little bit down on the throttle blades down there. So before I touch the throttle or do anything, I'm going to yank the carburetor off and clean it, so we don't get any of that dirt and debris down into the intake, and hopefully the intake is clean. We'll be able to inspect that when we take the carburetor off. So that's another thing we need to address. Another thing I noticed was the rats got into our wiring over here. So there's a broken wire, and then our wire over here on the ignition for the solenoid is kind of chewed up and missing. So I think we're just going to hot wire it for now. We're going to hot wire the coil and go from there. So, obvious stuff like the fuel pump lines or the fuel hoses and stuff are all broken off, and I'm sure the fuel in this thing's bad, and just general stuff like that we're going to have to go over. Now, typically when I'm doing something like this, I wouldn't worry about the oil very much, but I did take a peek at this oil, and it is kind of, I don't know, it's like, I guess it's flowing because it's dripping, but it's like kind of syrupy. So I'm kind of worried about that flowing through our really old Motorcraft oil filter down there. So I might throw some fresh oil in here and a new filter just to see. It's going to be cheap insurance to make sure that the bottom end on this thing is nice and lubricated. And I also noticed that we don't have any coolant in our radiator. That's kind of semi-common. I hope we don't have a big major leak in here somewhere, but if we do get this thing popped off, I need to remember that we don't have any coolant and get it topped off. So, and obviously our battery from the 1980s is not going to be any good. So I think first thing we're going to do is just kind of start taking stuff apart, get the battery out of here, yank this carburetor off, and just do a little bit of maintenance under the hood here and a little bit of cleaning, and try to get this thing to where we can at least start to see if it'll start. So I'm going to get after that. All right, guys, well, we're up under here in the truck. I'm getting ready to drain the oil. Got my oil pan here. I did get the vacuum cleaner out and sucked up all the stuff out of the pocket here for the starter. I think everything was kind of isolated here in the where the starter pocket is and didn't get up in here in the bell housing. I was thinking about this thing as a FE truck, a V8 truck, and it would have an inspection cover on the bell housing you can take off and clean all that stuff out. But this being a 6-cylinder, I'm not as familiar with these. It doesn't have that up here, so hopefully that is all it is. I spun the engine over by hand and didn't see a bunch of stuff trying to come out of there or anything, so hopefully that is all cleaned out of there, and that's not going to give us any trouble, because if it does, the solution is to pull the engine or the transmission. So we don't want to do that, but I'm going to get down here and change the oil. I wasn't really happy with how it looked on the dipstick. Hopefully it is just a precaution and we don't see anything that's not good. Alright, I have the drain plug out and nothing's coming out. It looks a little, that doesn't look great. It's very gray looking. That is not good. I hope that isn't an indication of our engine. I don't know why it's not coming out. I can see it up in there. Can you guys see it? Can you see it in there? It's there. Let me see if I can get something to poke. Maybe it just got some thick stuff in the bottom. Got an end of a zip tie here. Let's see if that'll work. Oh no. I knew something was up when I saw it on the dipstick. Yeah, it's starting to flow. Maybe it just had some thick stuff in the bottom. That's what I'm going with. There it comes. Okay, that's not as bad as I thought. It just had some sludge in the bottom. That is looking much, much better. Alright. Maybe crisis averted? I'm glad I didn't try to crank it with all that stuff in there. Let me take a little look at it. Oh yeah, that's much better. Okay. So we just had some sludge in the bottom of this engine that collected at the bottom. Remember, this thing hasn't ran in maybe even like 30 years. So that looks much better. I'm going to change on that filter, let this drain for quite a while, and we'll get some fresh oil in here before we start spinning this thing over. All right, back up here topside, I have some new oil in the engine and a new filter done there. Got that all changed out, and I've been tinkering with it a little bit off camera. The starter, the U starter I was going to use, this one down here, it had about 3 rotations in it, and it locked up and didn't want to go anymore. So I have a new starter down there, and I also had to do a new starter solenoid. The old one was very, very intermittent and causing lots of problems, and it took a long time to diagnose the starter was bad along with the starter solenoid, because usually it's just one or the other, but you know, when it's been sitting this long, I guess you can have both. So I do have it cranking. I haven't cranked on it very much. I guess I can show you guys. Where's my trigger? Get that hooked back up. Obviously our wiring system is leaving a little bit to be desired. That's going to take some work before we start it on the key. And speaking of key, we don't even have a key, so I got to get an ignition for this thing and get a key figured out for that. But see if we can get this thing to start. It's been kind of a problem with getting all the connections and everything to work, but see if it'll go. And of course it doesn't. If I remember right, it was this causing the problem. There we go. So it's spinning over. I'm not going to do very much because I am kind of worried about oil pressure. Normally, you know, it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but since we had all that sludge in the bottom of this thing, I'm worried about that plugging the pickup tube up and causing problems and just shelling the engine. So I'm going to try to get that oil pressure sensor right there out and see if I can get a mechanical gauge in there, because obviously our electronics in the engine cab or the cab doesn't work, so I'm not going to be able to look at the oil pressure gauge. So just get a mechanical gauge in there and I'll be able to watch the oil pressure and know that we're good there. So while we're up here, let's go ahead and take a look at the distributor, because we know that's going to be a problem. One thing I noticed, this thing has a steel hard line for the vacuum advance, and the vacuum advance pod has a threaded line in there. So I think that's kind of a 67 thing, because the later 6 cylinders I have don't have that. Oh boy, looks like our distributor's been at the bottom of the lake. Well, okay. It looks a lot different than I'm used to seeing too. Okay, well, that's gonna either, let's see if, well, mechanical advance is either seized or it doesn't have that. I'm sure it should have that, so I'm probably seized. This is a lot different than I'm used to seeing. All right, rotor is somewhat seized too. All right, well, that's probably going to have to come out of there if I had to guess. I guess we'll worry about that later. Just put that back on there. Right now we're going to be worried about oil pressure, so I'm going to see if I can get something figured out there. All right, so I rigged up my oil pressure gauge. You can see it down there, and I've cranked on it enough that I think I should see it at least start to move. And I didn't crank on it a ton, so it could just be that we haven't pumped oil up through our filter and gotten oil everywhere and enough to see pressure in the gauge. But I'm kind of nervous about cranking on it too much because this engine's been sitting for so long without oil running through everything. So I'm kind of worried that the pickup is plugged up with all that sludge that was down there in the bottom of that pan, because obviously not all of that's going to come out because it wasn't up to temp when we drained the oil. And that pickup tube, the screen, is going to be pretty far down in that stuff, so it might be that it's stuck in a pool of sludge and it can't pull, with just cranking on it, it can't pull everything through that to kind of get everything kind of loosened up. So I think we need to pull that distributor anyway because it is terrible looking. So I'm just going to pull the distributor and get a drive down in there, 5/16, and drive the oil pump with the drill and hopefully get some oil pressure up there on that gauge to where we can see it. So I'm hoping this distributor comes out. It's probably going to be stuck. I've already got the area kind of cleaned off so we don't get any dirt or debris, or as little as I can, in the hole. I also have the rotor turned towards the engine and then the mark on there where the rotor is. So when I stab whatever distributor I go back in here with, it may not be this one, that I don't have to mess with timing. Now, as long as we don't rotate the engine, that is fine. If we rotate the engine, then we have to start over. All right, easy part, got the bolt out. Now I'm guessing, let's see if we can get this thing out of here. It's coming. We got lucky. Gotta get the hold down off. Forgot about that. There's the hold down. I'm gonna blow that off real quick before we get a big gaping hole down into the inside of our engine. All right. Oh, I didn't undo the vacuum hose, hard line. That is one bad thing about this distributor having a hard line here, that if I get a different one, it's going to be made for a soft line, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to change this vacuum pod or not. I really like that it has this original hard line here. It's kind of neat. It's better than a soft line that's always going to be cracking and giving you a vacuum leak. I guess we'll figure that out when we get to that far. All right. Another thing about the distributor, it has a cap right here to lubricate your shaft. Later model ones don't have that. Alright, our oil pump shaft came out with the oil pump drive. Or is it part of... See, this shows how much I know about 6-cylinders. I guess it's pinned in with that. Okay, so we'll have to find one to drive that. But here's a look at the... Make sure you guys... I'm out of frame. Here's a look at the distributor. There's our points. I'm guessing... There's the points. I'm guessing they're not any good anymore. Even if you cleaned them. I don't know why this thing got so rusty in here. I guess just from years and years of sitting. But I'm going to figure something out to drive that oil pump, and we'll move from there. Alright, I have my setup in here. I have the oil pump drive back in here, and then a 5/16 socket with a extension on it, and they're all taped up because if they fall off when you pull them out, you're not going to have a good time because they go right down to the oil pan. So, there's my gauge back there. We're going to spin it clockwise, I think is correct. I'm going to try to do this with one hand so I can show you guys what I'm doing here. Alright, we are connected. Let's see if you guys can see that oil pressure gauge. There, it picked it up. There, we got 50. I'm just going to let this run for a while and get oil pumped up everywhere into the engine. All right. We got good oil pressure now. So that makes me feel good. I'm guessing, since it kind of popped right there, I'm guessing that the pickup tube was kind of plugged up with that stuff. So I'm glad we did that. We didn't just try to crank on this. It probably didn't have enough pressure when you're just cranking on it, because the engine's spinning so slow and that distributor is going to be spinning so slow that the oil pump didn't create enough vacuum to pull that sludgy stuff through the screen on the pickup. But when we spun it faster with the drill, it was enough to pop that stuff out. And hopefully that doesn't cause any more problems down the road, but we'll see how it goes. We need to get some heat in this engine and change that oil again, and hopefully get some of that sludge out of there. So I'm going to see about a distributor. I looked quick online, and remans were non-existent, and all you could find was like aftermarket HEI stuff, and I'm not really a big fan of that on this. You know, it just doesn't look right to me. It's probably better, but it just doesn't look right. So I'm going to see if I have a distributor to use here, and if I have a distributor, if we can use that hard line for the vacuum advance, or change out the vacuum pod on the other distributor, or maybe we can even get the other distributor freed up and working. So I'm going to work on that, and I'll let you guys know what I find. Alright, now we have the oil situation all figured out. I've been messing with the distributor because I'm going to have to get that figured out And I don't have any replacements here that are this style, and I couldn't find any replacements online. So I went to town working on this guy, seeing if I can get it to get freed up and spin freely and everything like that. And see if I can do this with one hand. It's going to be kind of tricky, so bear with me. I don't believe this has a mechanical advance. I don't know if that is correct or not. You guys can let me know in the comments below, but I believe this is an early style distributor from my research. And this plate right here is for the vacuum advance, and it was seized up solid. But if you can see here, I got some penetrant oil in there and got it freed up. And believe it or not, the vacuum diaphragm is actually good. So I think we are good there with the vacuum advance working and the plate spinning freely. Now the points were completely wasted, and I'm sure the condenser, it probably worked, but it was on its way out. And the rotor was completely corroded. So I went to my parts guy, and he dug out the old book, and I think he found the right parts. I left the parts with him there, and he's going to get some for me tomorrow, and we'll see if they're correct. But we'll put these in here and get them adjusted. Now the shaft in here feels like it's spinning free and stuff, but I'll lubricate it up since we have that port there. And like I said, the vacuum diaphragm, I did check it by sucking vacuum on this port here, and it is moving the plate. So our vacuum advance is working. So with all that being said, I'm going to get the drill and everything out of there and the oil pump drive and put it back in the distributor and put the distributor back in here so we can spin the motor back over and verify that we have oil pressure while we're cranking on it here. So we'll see how that works. All right, so I yanked the spark plugs out of here and kind of learning some more about this engine. I think the reason this truck was parked is they just drove it until it quit running. You know, when you kind of look at the distributor, that was kind of an indication that maybe something was wrong there because it was so corroded, but that could be just because it set so long. But then you pull the spark plugs out and you look at them, and if you look at this, you can see there the porcelain around the electrode is broken out on that one. It is broken out on this one. It's broken out on this one. This one I broke the end of it there, but you can see that it's broken out on that one. And this one here, it's not broke out, but if you can tell, see how eroded that ground strap is and how eroded down the electrode is. It's just, I think these have just been in here way too long. And see that? I mean, it's just, there's nothing there. I think this truck just got driven until it quit running and then it was parked. I'm hoping that's the case anyway. We'll throw some new spark plugs in there, some new ignition parts, and a new carburetor. I don't think I mentioned the carburetor. You know, I said it had junk in it. You probably can't see it, but there's junk down in here. But the throttle blade is seized up on this thing, and new one of those isn't too expensive. It's about $100, so I just got a new one coming. And we'll get some new spark plugs in here. Hopefully we'll have spark. I'll get a new fuel pump on here because that fuel pump ain't pumping. And we'll see if we can get this thing to pop off. Alright, well, I'm still waiting on ignition parts for that distributor. It's over here. They had to order them in, so they should be here today sometime. But man, it's been hard not to just go ahead and go to town ordering stuff for this engine, like radiator hoses, all that kind of stuff. But I want to hear it run before I get too carried away with it, so I'm kind of reserving myself. But I did get, like, I had a fuel pump in stock, so I just threw one on there and stuff like that. And since I'm waiting on ignition parts, I decided I'd come inside and start tinkering with the inside and see what I can get to work. And headlights didn't work. I had to put a new switch in it. So a new switch, a new dimmer switch, and I got one of the headlights working. The other one isn't working, unfortunately. I think the bulb must be burned out or something. But I did get the lights working, and I got the dome light working. And if you fiddle with it enough, you can get the dash lights to work. You're not gonna be able to see those in the shop. But I also got my Ford spotlight working. I gotta turn the key on. Got the spotlight working. So that thing's pretty cool. That is an original Ford spotlight. So this piece is really cool. So I'm glad I got that working. The wipers work, and I did get the blower motor working and all that kind of stuff, and the blinkers actually work on this thing, which is pretty cool. They're really slow, and the flasher relay is really loud, but the blinkers do work. Now we only have front headlights, or front marker lights, but the front marker lights work as well. So moving right along with getting this thing back on the road and getting tuned up. Hopefully those ignition parts come in, we'll throw them in that distributor and put the distributor back in it, and then we can spin the thing over, so because I'm going to lose time if I spin it over now. So I got that. Oh, and I replaced ignition switch. I didn't mention that, but I didn't have a key for this, so I had to throw an ignition switch in it from another 67, and hopefully we'll be able to run it off the key at that point, and I won't have to use my trigger. I'm going to check and see if I have voltage to my coil with the key on and that kind of stuff, but hopefully those ignition parts get in, and we'll throw them into that distributor, and maybe we'll hear some life out of this thing. All right, I finally got all of my ignition parts in. Got them thrown in the distributor. We have a new condenser points and a rotor. Also got a new cap and some new spark plugs. Now this is a good instance to have, or a good time to have, a really good old-fashioned parts guy. And that's what I have here in my local town. He got out the old book and found me these parts for this old style distributor, which I guess this is kind of like, they probably quit this in 67, but this is like the early style distributor for the 6 cylinders. And I guess the ignition parts are kind of hard to find for that, or at least most of the time you probably get the later model stuff and it's wrong and you have to go back. But my guy got me the right stuff the first time. I did bring him the old parts and left them with him, and he verified they were right and got them in for me the next day. Also got me some spark plugs to throw in there because those old ones were absolutely trash. So I got the points all set up in this. I'm going to throw the distributor in here, and I'll gap the spark plugs and throw them in, and we'll see if this thing will pop off. Now the distributor, if you remember right, I had it marked to point directly at the engine, the rotor, and I shouldn't have to worry about anything since I haven't touched the engine. Theoretically, I throw this thing in and everything's timed the way it was, if it was timed correctly. Now we can check that after we get it running, but hopefully that's good enough to get it fired off and we don't have to mess with trying to find top dead center on number 1 and all of that stuff, because I didn't move the engine. Well, theoretically the engine didn't move. I don't know, someone might have come over here and spun it over and screwed with me, but I doubt it. So we're gonna get this distributor thrown in here. If I can get you guys in here where you can see. Yeah, can you see that good? Hopefully so. All right, let's see how many tries this is going to take me. I get our oil pump drive in as well. If I can find the hole. There we go. Alright, as we push this down, this rotor is going to spin because of the, I'm not even remotely close to the right orientation for the vacuum canister. You gotta remember that. Alright. This thing's going to rotate as we shove it down because of the taper, or the twist in the gear for the camshaft. But right now, I just want to get it kind of started and kind of get a feel for where it needs to set down. There, it rotated in. That actually might be perfect. It's pointing, I mean, pretty much directly at the engine block, like it was. So we get our vacuum line where it needs to be. Make sure we didn't. There we go. Alright. Our vacuum line is correct, so we know the orientation of that is correct, and our rotor is pointed towards the engine block. So hopefully this is good enough to just get us fired off. I'll get this cinched down, and I'll crank on this thing for the first time since we have that oil pressure gauge in there, and we spun it over with the drill to make sure we got oil pressure while we're cranking on it. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. Alright, I got the distributor all cinched down. It's time to see if we can crank this thing over. And now I'm actually going to use the key for the first time. So we're going to see if our wiring is all good to our starter solenoid over there on the fender. And see how it works. Now, keep an eye on that oil pressure and see if we gain any while we're cranking on it here. Alright, here goes nothing. Yeah, that is pretty good. I didn't get to see the oil pressure. Did we have any? Let's find out real quick. I gotta crank on it over here. I'm glad the key works, because you start messing with all that stuff under the dash, it gets kind of annoying. All right. Yep. Nope. Okay. There we go. Now we got oil pressure. I guess it probably had to crank a little bit before it started building any. What do we got here? 40. That's pretty good while cranking, isn't it? All right. So I guess now I got to put the spark plugs in it and get some spark plug wires, get our new cap on there. And I'm going to, I don't have the carburetor yet, the new carburetor. I'm going to put the old carburetor on it, and so we can kind of regulate the airflow a little bit. And we'll see if this thing will pop off with some starter fluid or something like that. Maybe pour some gas down there, see if we can get it to run a little bit. But I'm going to get after the spark plugs and the rest of the wires, and we'll catch back up with you guys when I'm ready to fire it off. All right, I have everything buttoned back up, and I have the old carburetor back on it, like I said, because our new one isn't here yet. It's still going to be a few days. And I went ahead and hooked up our fuel pump, and I have a temporary fuel jug here. Make sure that's down on the fuel. It is. Okay, so I'm going to crank on it, and we're going to see, hopefully, that the carburetor gets some fuel into the engine. And I've had this carburetor off and was banging around on a lot, so I'm hoping if the needle and seats were stuck, they're open now. We're going to see. I'm sure the accelerator pump's going to leak fuel all over the place, but we can just deal with that as we go. The main thing is just see if this thing's going to run. The new carburetor is going to fix all that. So I guess I got to turn the key on. That's first step. Key's on. I'm going to crank on it out here just so I can keep an eye on things. All right, let's give it a go. No fuel yet. Let me give it a little tickle of starting fluid just to see if we can get that pump going. There, like that. Yeah, we don't have fuel yet. Nope. I think we're pretty low on fuel. This carburetor's probably getting a little gummed up. And we've now started leaking fuel everywhere from our accelerator pump. Let's just see if we can get it to sit here and idle. Not running out of fuel yet, are we? Almost starting to idle. There, it's idling, barely. I'm guessing our issue is going to be fuel delivery, but at least we have spark and the thing sits there and idles. I didn't even look at the oil pressure. I guess we can see if we can fire off enough to look at the oil pressure gauge. 50, 40, 50, for as low as it's idling, that's pretty darn good. Wonder if I could, this choke could be free enough I could set the choke a little bit. Yeah, let me give it some choke, see if it likes that. Probably a little too much. Let me try that. There we go. Too much? And our battery's getting low. Ah. I'd like it to sit here and idle, but that may be asking too much of this carburetor. Battery charger on. I don't know if that was too much or too little choke. There we go. Dang, I already actually had to shut it off with the key. So there we go. We have a running 67 F-100 for the first time in more than 30 years. So that's pretty cool. It sounded pretty good, actually. The muffler is completely rotted off of this thing. I guess I could show you guys. That's if you saw it or heard it being a little loud. I mean, it is like completely gone. There's the back end of it. Now, it looks like we had some critters in the exhaust. Blew out their winter stash. But yeah, the muffler, that's where the muffler should be. There's the exhaust pipe, and then there's the back end of the muffler. So yeah, this thing actually runs pretty good. There's our fuel leaking out of the bowl from our accelerator pump. Our new carburetor will fix that. Hopefully when we get the new carb in here, this thing will run even better. So now I am pretty confident that this thing's going to run pretty good for us. I'm going to go ahead and start ordering some parts, you know, get stuff for the brakes, get radiator hoses, and I need to get some more coolant because remember it's bone dry. Get some coolant. Hopefully our radiator holds water. I need to see if the alternator's working. All that kind of little stuff like that. I'm going to start ordering parts, and we'll see if we can get this thing back on the road. I really want to drive it, take it out and drive it, because I think that would be pretty neat. And tires, probably need to do something about tires. These are actually brand new tires, but they're from 2007, and this one's already going flat. So I might put some different tires on it. I mean, this will be good enough to drive it for now, but in the future I want to put some tires on it. But yeah, this thing runs pretty good. I guess we could see if it would start from the key. Let me hook our starter solenoid back up. Our battery cable's a little warm from cranking on it. Wonder how much fuel we got. We got enough to run it, about half a cup. Let's see if she'll start off the key for us. There, the alternator light's working. The alternator must be charging, the light went off. Yeah, we're getting us a little truck. So I'm going to order some parts and we'll dive back into this thing. Hopefully when that carburetor gets here and we can sit here and let this thing idle and run a little bit better, get some water in it and get it up to temperature for the first time, and just see how it's going to run when it's hot, because sometimes if you have problems, you know, it's going to be masked when the oil's all cold, but if you get it hot, it might be having some problems. But we'll go cross that bridge when we get there, I suppose. So I'm going to catch up with you guys later. All right, guys, we're back on this 67 F-100. It's been a few days since we last worked on it. We left off with I didn't have the carburetor and we got it running. Well, now I have the carburetor on it. We have the new carburetor on it, and it fit for the most part. The big thing was the hard lines all line up for the vacuum and the fuel line. Now the choke cable, I had to replace the bracket from the original. You can see that there, and then the arm from the original because it was feeding from the wrong side. And the throttle is going to be, it doesn't exactly line up. My throttle linkage here is too short, so I'm going to have to make something work there. But it's not too bad. Overall, it's pretty much an exact fit. And we have that. I've been kind of tuning on that thing. But before we get into the carburetor, I was going to have this thing running off the fuel tank and, you know, all tuned up and ready to go for you guys. So I was working on getting fuel put in the tank and getting it pulled from the in-cab fuel tank. And I was having a heck of a time getting it to pull fuel out of there. I put some gas in there and I couldn't get it to pull fuel. And I knew the line was free because I blew through it. And I pulled the sending unit out. And as you can see, this is what's left of the sending unit. And it is rather rusty. So that was an indication of why I couldn't get anything to pick up out of the pickup tube, because I'm sure the pickup tube was rusted in two. So I peeked down in there, thing was full of rust, and it was actually leaking. It was leaking over here in this corner that I didn't see, and was leaking down here on the floor. And I got a bunch of gas inside of there, but that's not too big of a deal. But yeah, the inside of that tank was just terribly rusty. Some of the worst rust I've seen in a fuel tank. If I remember right, when I got this thing, it didn't have a filler cap on it. So that thing was just exposed to the elements, and rain and stuff was able to go in there. And I'm sure once the water got in there, it corroded everything, then it rusted out, then the water drained out, so you would never know it. But until you put gas in there, and it all leaked out. But I have a replacement in stock. A replacement gas tank is over there on that frame over there. Probably can't see it. And I'm going to throw that in here at a later date. And I just have it running off a little bottle right now for the meantime. So let's fire this thing up and let you guys hear it now with that new tuned up carburetor. Or the new non-leaking carburetor, I guess. Non-leaking and not gummed up. We'll get it fired up here. I did get the oil pressure light works, and the alternator light works. So now that I put the sending unit back in for the oil pressure, and they both go off. Might have the idle set a little bit low. There we go. Yeah, this thing's running pretty good. Now remember, this doesn't have a muffler, so it's a little bit loud. I do have a muffler here that I just got for it yesterday. That we'll put that on it at another episode. But really happy to have this engine sitting here running. And I think it's running pretty good. It does have a little bit of a hiccup here and there. But I'll do some more tuning. I haven't even put a timing line on it or messed with the timing or anything. It's just wherever I stab the distributor in. So I'll play with that and see if I can get that to go away. Hopefully that's no big deal, but it sounds pretty good when you rev it up. And of course it'll sound better once we get a muffler on the thing. It's not just straight pipe out the Y pipe. But yeah, really glad to have this thing running. Now that we know this thing runs pretty decent, I did order a whole mess of parts, a bunch of parts to throw on this thing. Like we need to put some bushings on the radius arms, and all new brakes, master cylinder, wheel cylinders, all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to put a big order with the guys at CP Addicts Complete Performance. I'm going to put a big order in for all the cosmetic stuff and everything, and just kind of try to polish this thing up. And I actually ordered some wipe-on clear coat. We're going to try to do that on the body on this thing, see if we can make that patina look pretty good. I think it'll be a pretty good candidate for that once we kind of get this oxidation down and get some clear coat on there to seal this thing back up. One thing I wasn't sure about is right here you can kind of see the Southwestern Bell logo, and that's actually where somebody has scraped the old logo off, and that's why you can still read it, because they scraped the paint off as they scraped the decal off. So I was kind of wondering, should I get some decals made to put back on here, or should I just leave this like that? I'm not sure. The other side doesn't have that, so we won't have that on the other side. But just something to think about. I'm not sure what I'm going to do there. I'm not sure what this sticker is right here. It's definitely different than the other side, but not sure there. Also, kind of got a game plan with the bed. Have the back end opened up here. You can see all the really old plywood that's in here. And I was waiting until I had this thing outside to clean it all up. But I think I'm going to rip all this out, and there's a piece of sheet metal underneath that that's kind of rusty. You can see the holes in it here. Going to rip that layer of sheet metal out, and that gives me the runners, access to the runners here on the bed, and we'll be able to drop this thing down a couple more inches and mount it to the frame. And then I'll come back in and put new plywood in so this bed is usable again. But well, like I said, we'll do that on another episode. I think the next episode on this truck, we're going to be focusing on some of the cosmetics. We're also going to get it on the lift and do all the mechanic work underneath it, so brakes and an exhaust and that kind of stuff. You know, service everything, make sure everything's good. In the meantime, I'm going to do some stuff off camera on this truck. I'm going to do things like radiator hoses, belts. I'm going to power wash the inside here. I'm going to tune on the carburetor some, see if I can get it running a little bit better. See if I can get that linkage to work. And just little stuff like that under here in the motor. And I'm also going to get the thing really hot and then change the oil and put some fresh oil in there, new filter, and try to get some of that sludge out of the engine and that kind of stuff. So I'll be doing that off camera because it's just kind of general maintenance kind of stuff. And we're going to pick up on this truck again whenever I start doing the cosmetics, the exterior and underneath at a minimum. We might do a different episode on the interior because it's going to need a lot of work. We'll kind of see how we end up on the episodes on that. But be looking for the exterior episode on this truck in the future. In the meantime, thanks for watching, guys. Give me a thumbs up if you're liking this Southwestern Bell truck. Give me a subscribe if you want to see more of it. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks, guys.